Good morning, everybody. So it's after a productive day yesterday, it's good that today we'll speak about a sector which is underrepresented usually. And I'd just like to start by asking who here is from the finance sector, just to check. Put your hands up, please, if you're from the finance sector. 1, 2. Yeah, it's usually like that. It's usually a few participants. But again, this is not a finance and biodiversity event. It's a business and biodiversity event, so maybe that's the reason. From my experience, typically you have zero or a few coming to business and biodiversity from the finance sector. And I say this from my experience in the European Business and Biodiversity platform. And the first phase of this platform was launched in 2007. And it was only restricted to 6 sectors, including the extractive sector, the forestry sector, agriculture, tourism, and one of them was finance. And unfortunately, for the 3 years that we had the platform for in the first, from 2007 to 2010, it was very hard to engage the finance sector. Now the European Business and Biodiversity platform, since its relaunch in 2014, last year, also has an agenda to involve the finance sector, is doing a little bit better with a few representatives. But we still don't have active involvement. However, that's not to say that the finance sector is not doing anything on biodiversity and on the broader environmental agenda especially. It's just that there is a disconnect at the moment. However, in today's session, we have several different speakers who will show you that there is action from the finance sector. And we have a representation from the private sector, Frank Voorhees. I'm speaking in order by which the presentations will come. Frank Voorhees from Earthmind, then Anders Nordheim from an international organization from UNEP Finance Initiative, and Eva Meyerhofer from a European institution of the European Investment Bank. You will see that there are different aspects of the finance sector. So it could be the involvement of financial institutions. What actions are they taking in their financing decision-making when it comes to making investments in biodiversity? They rarely do it directly, but it's more through the companies they invest in. So do they care whether these companies are taking actions on biodiversity and on the environmental agenda more broadly? And what are what factors do they consider? What are their motivations? And what are the challenges for the finance sector to undertake assessments of biodiversity in their financial decision making? Another one is actually coming from one motivation, of course, is from the risks perspective, because investing in companies that are not likely to be sustainable in the future is simply not a good long-term investment. And this is especially relevant for long-term investment institutions such as pension funds. You've probably seen the news several months ago that the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund divested from coal. And after that, several private sector financial institutions and insurance companies actually did the same. And yeah, sure, you can argue that somebody else bought the shares in the coal companies, but it's still a good indication that in the long term, for example, some financial institutions see a risk in certain industries that would not be sustainable. And another factor is the pressure from the consumers. Some clients of banks are coming and saying, why are you not investing in sustainable companies? So then the banks are undertaking actions to basically start making sustainable investments, and that involves having experts who assess the different companies that are in their portfolio to make sure that the company's activities are in line with good biodiversity management and good sustainability and environmental management broadly. There is an emerging niche of such banks. For example, in the Netherlands, you have several such banks like Triodos Bank, ISN Bank, and I'm sure in a few other European countries you have banks that specialize in this niche, but you also see it coming with bigger banks. And another one is, of course, sustainability indexes. So, like the FTSE 4 Good index or the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, where these indexes follow companies that respond to certain environmental criteria. And that again, these indexes basically help shareholders who want to invest in sustainable companies. They're not strictly biodiversity companies for now, but it's already, sustainable is typically usually in energy efficiency at the moment and in waste management, resource efficiency more broadly. But there is a positive trend there that they're getting more and more specialized. And finally, there's financing for biodiversity itself. So it's financing by companies. Why would they finance biodiversity? Well, you've seen a number of examples yesterday. Sometimes companies take voluntary action in order to have social license to operate, so to speak, good brand recognition, risk management, risk reduction, and also innovative financing schemes, such as payments for ecosystem services that you have typically in the public sector. Most payments for ecosystem services are actually funded by the public sector, over 90%. But you have a number of private sector companies in water management especially that invest in payments for ecosystem services, which is basically they pay certain practitioners such as farmers to change their farming practices, not to use polluting fertilizers, for example, in order to reduce or, well, especially avoid pollution on water, because their business is to sell water. So there are business models out there that are actually good for biodiversity and that are bankable and that generate interest, business interest and financial returns. So it'll be very useful today to discuss on all these different aspects when we speak about the finance sector, so understand banks, financial institutions, but also financial decision-making by the banks, but also by businesses themselves in investing in biodiversity. And I think that the presentations that are coming forward will give you a flavor of these different perspectives. So we'll take the first hour on the presentations and on questions and answers specifically on the presentations. And afterwards we'll take the second hour. So it's good that we dedicate 2 hours to the finance sector, to discussing more broadly with you, with the audience, and with whoever's following online. So now it's to introduce Frank Voorhees from Earthmind to show you some private sector perspectives on opportunities and challenges in the finance sector. Thank you.